Well, some NFL Sundays are stranger than others, and it was certainly a wild, crazy Week 15 Sunday today. Capped off by a wild and crazy game. If you saw that San Francisco-New England game, what a game it was, first of all, and a strange game. In the first half, looked like it was going to be a low-scoring defensive struggle because of the weather, the freezing rain, but turned into a shootout in the second half. Again, San Francisco winning 41-34. San Francisco was up 31-3 in the middle of the third quarter. At that point, it was a laugher. New England, a quick outburst to offense. I say quick because they moved from 31-3 to tied at 31-all in 15 minutes of game action. With 7 minutes in the third quarter, they were down 31-3. With 7 minutes left in the game, it was tied at 31 apiece. And Tom Brady and that offense were slapping each other on the back and chuckling on the sideline. And right when they were doing that, literally as the camera was showing Brady and the offense celebrating and slapping each other on the back on the sidelines, rookie LaMichael James, rookie running back from Oregon, returned to kick 65 yards to the New England 35-yard line. This was the ensuing kickoff after New England had tied it up at 31 apiece. Two plays later, San Francisco scored to take a 7-point lead, a lead they never relinquished. So it was a situation where the Patriots brought it all the way back but couldn't finish the job. San Francisco pulling out a big road victory, moving one more step closer to a first-round bye in the playoffs, and New England now is not in the driver's seat in terms of those first-round byes. Houston and Denver are both in good shape to get those byes. That's because they both won today. Houston beating the Indianapolis Colts 29-17. Denver was dominant again. Broncos have now won 9 straight games. They have a top 5 defense to go along with their top 5 offense. The final score today in Baltimore, Denver 34-17, but that's a little misleading. This was 31-3. Baltimore tacked on a couple of late garbage time touchdowns. Peyton Manning was Peyton Manning. He actually didn't have to throw that much today. I believe he only threw for 208 or 210 yards, something like that. Sean Marino had a good day on the ground. But the Denver defense just suffocated and dominated the Baltimore offense all day until the fourth quarter when they backed off a little bit. And as we said, Baltimore tacked on a couple of late touchdowns. But the Broncos look as good as any team in the NFL right now. Doesn't look like they're going to be able to catch Houston for home field advantage throughout, because Houston does have the tiebreaker by virtue of the fact they beat Denver early in this season. But now that New England lost, Denver's in good shape. They can just win their last 2 games, and like we said, they've won 9 in a row. They will have a bye in the first round of the playoffs. So here's the way the AFC playoff picture looks. You have your 4 division leaders: Denver, New England, Houston, and Baltimore. Now Baltimore lost again today. It's a free fall at this point for Baltimore. They're now 9-5. We mentioned Denver beating them 34-17. And even though Baltimore's clinched a playoff spot, they might lose out. They have 2 tough games remaining against the New York Giants and on the road against the Cincinnati Bengals. So Baltimore looks to be the weakest of all the playoff teams right now, even though they still are leading the AFC North. If the season ended today, the 2 wild card teams in the AFC would be the Indianapolis Colts and the Cincinnati Bengals. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, who lost to Dallas today in overtime, get to that result in a second, the Steelers still control their own destiny because the Steelers play Cincinnati next week. So if the Steelers win their last 2 games against Cincinnati and then I believe against Cleveland, then Pittsburgh will make the playoffs. Another team that's in it, the only other team that's in it, there's only 8 possible teams. The 7 teams I just mentioned, the 4 division leaders: Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and the New York Jets. Hard as it is to believe, the Jets, who play in Tennessee tomorrow night, or I guess technically that's tonight now, the Jets at 6-7. If they win out, they could still make the playoffs. There's a couple of different ways they could do it. I heard guys after the game tonight, after the New England-San Francisco game, I heard a couple of guys talking about the possibility of the Jets getting in, saying, well, if Cincinnati and Pittsburgh both finished 8-8, for example, if Pittsburgh were to win next week, and then Cincinnati was to lose to Baltimore in Week 17, and Pittsburgh was to lose to Cleveland. But the avenue they're missing, the avenue that they don't either realize, but to me, it's more likely for the Jets to get in the playoffs by Indianapolis losing their last 2 games. That's because Indianapolis, who lost to Houston, as we said, 29-17 today, they play Houston again. They might be able to beat Houston. It's going to be in Indianapolis this time, but they're going to be underdogs in that game. Now, their other game is against the Kansas City Chiefs, who were shut out today in Oakland. Chiefs look like the worst team in the league, but that game is in Kansas City. Chiefs beat Carolina at home a couple of weeks ago, so if Indianapolis loses out, as good as it looks for the Colts now, Even after their loss today, the Colts still 9-5 in great shape. But if they lose out and the Jets win out, remember the Jets beat Indianapolis earlier this year. So Indianapolis has not yet clinched, and the Jets are still in it, hard as that is to believe with all the negativity that's been surrounding the Jets this season. Now, we mentioned the Dallas Cowboys beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 27-24 in overtime today. Huge win for Dallas, and the NFC is now officially craziness. That's because the New York Giants, who have been leading the NFC East all year, I mean, remember the Giants, a month ago they had 3 losses, and the next closest team in the division had 6 losses. They were really in command. They were blown out 34-0 in Atlanta today. The Falcons, still tied with Houston for the NFL's best record, responded to that disappointing road loss in Carolina, 34-0 over the New York Giants. So now Washington, if the season ended today, Washington, who beat Cleveland 38-21 today without Robert Griffin III. I mean, who would have guessed that the Redskins could put up 38 points without RG3? That's exactly what they did. Washington, Dallas, and the Giants all tied for first in the NFC East. But as of now, Washington would be your division champion because they hold the tiebreakers. Now, both the Giants and Dallas still control their own destiny in terms of making the playoffs. Dallas still plays Washington in Week 17. So if either one of those teams win their last 2 games, the Dallas Cowboys or the New York Giants, they will make the playoffs, and Washington certainly has not clinched. So anything can happen in the East. Any one of these 3 teams could win the division. These 3 teams, meaning Washington, Dallas, and the Giants. Any one of these 3 teams could still miss the playoffs. It is going to be a crazy last couple of weeks in that division. Let's talk about the rest of the playoff picture in the NFC. Green Bay pulling out a 21-13 win today over Chicago, wrapping up the NFC North. The Bears, 8-6. They were 7-1. And if the season ended today, they would not make the playoffs, and they don't control their own destiny. They need help. Now, they do have an easy remaining schedule. They play the Arizona Cardinals next week, and then on the road in Detroit. Arizona and Detroit play today. We'll talk about that mess of a game here in a second. But Chicago, I mean, they have fallen off the face of the earth, and Lovie Smith, I think he is in trouble. I think his job is in trouble if the Bears don't make the playoffs. This will be the second year in a row they've completely collapsed. Last year it could be blamed on Jay Cutler's injury, but you can't blame it on that this year. Jay Cutler was healthy and playing today, did not play well. Green Bay played well on defense. Once again, their offense struggled to get it going. I know Chicago has a good defense themselves, but I've said it for the last couple of weeks. I do not trust the Green Bay Packers, even though they're 10-4 and they've locked up the NFC North. This is not the same team. This is not the Green Bay Packers team we've seen over the last couple of years. I don't consider them a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And so I'll be looking for my spot. I don't know if it's next week, the week after, week 1 of the playoffs. I don't know. But I will be. I think it's going to be ripe here over the next few weeks, a spot to bet against the Green Bay Packers, because I believe a public opinion of them is a little higher than it should be at this point. They're just not able to get it going on offense this season. For whatever reason, they're bottom half of the league in total offense, only 21 points again today. They've only topped 31 points once this year. They averaged 35 a game last year. So they're a different team, but they did pull out a good road win today in Chicago. Another NFC North team that pulled out a good win today, the Minnesota Vikings, 36-22 over the St. Louis Rams in a game that was sort of an elimination game. Whichever team had lost that game would have been eliminated from the playoffs. But now that the Vikings won, now that the Bears lost, if the season ended today, Minnesota would be in the playoffs. I mean, I think when this team lost their 6th game a few weeks ago, everybody sort of wrote them off. I know I did. But they're right back in it now, and credit to that defense and Adrian Peterson, 200-plus yards again today. He's now less than 300 yards away from breaking Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing record with 2 remaining games. It's remarkable. Coming into today, Adrian Peterson was averaging 6 yards per rush. He's averaging more yards per rush than Christian Ponder is averaging yards per pass. It's amazing. They have no passing game at this point. The Minnesota Vikings, their best wide receiver, Percy Harvin, out for the remainder of the year. Christian Ponder playing some bad football lately. Everybody in the stands, the defense, the players on defense, the coaching staff on the opposing defense, everybody knows Adrian Peterson is going to get the ball. They're going to feed him the ball, and they still can't stop it. They know it's coming, and they still can't stop it. Absolutely remarkable what Adrian Peterson's been doing. And as we said, if the season ended today, Minnesota would be in the playoffs, but a lot can still happen. As we mentioned, the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants, who would be out if the season ended today, they both still control their own destiny. Chicago, even though they don't control their own destiny at 8-6, they could still get in. So a lot can happen over these last couple of weeks. The other wild card team, of course, the 4 division leaders right now in the NFC, Green Bay, Washington, as we mentioned, by virtue of the tie break, the Atlanta Falcons, and the San Francisco 49ers. So the other wild card team right now would be Seattle, but to call Seattle a wild card team, technically that's what they'd be, but they're playing as good a football as any team in the NFL right now. I know they played their second straight bad team this week, the Buffalo Bills, beat the Bills 50-17, becoming the first team since 1950 to score 50 points 2 consecutive weeks. I mean, hasn't happened in 62 years in the NFL. And offense is supposed to be Seattle's weakness. I mean, this is a team built around the defense. So scary how good the Seahawks are looking lately. And again, they're a wild card team right now. Doesn't look like they'll be able to catch San Francisco in the division because San Francisco won tonight. But I would not want to play the Seattle Seahawks at this point. They are absolutely rolling. What else can you say about the Buffalo Bills, by the way? The Bills getting blown out again. Their season is a total disaster. I think Chan Gailey, even though he hasn't been talked about a lot as a coach on the hot seat. You got to cut me a little slack here. It's a little late. But I do think Chan Gailey's job is in trouble in Buffalo. Again, Seattle rolling the Bills 50-17 today in Canada. And even though I was watching that game, I didn't have the volume up. Of course, we were doing the live. I take that back. That game was in the afternoon, but still, I was watching it on a split screen, didn't have the volume up. I heard after the game that the Rogers Center in Toronto, where they played that game, was a very pro-Seahawks crowd, which is a surprise because Toronto is so close to Buffalo. Obviously, it was a Bills home game technically. And I heard a stat today that 12% of Bills season ticket holders are from Canada. I know Buffalo's near the Canadian border still. That stat surprised me a little bit. But apparently the Bills not getting much support in Toronto today, and they got blown out of the building 50-17. So again, Seattle and Minnesota would get the final 2 wild card spots in the NFC if the season ended today. The Giants, Dallas still in it. The Bears still in it. Washington hasn't clinched anything. They lead the NFC East as it stands right now. So as you can tell, everything is still out there on the table these last couple of weeks. Should be a great couple of weeks. Just a final thought on how weird the NFL is. I mean, it's great. The parity that's in the NFL is talked about a lot. Sometimes people talk about it as a downside, saying we'll never see a true dynasty again, a true great team because of all the parity that's created with the salary cap and the salary floor to where every team has to spend a certain amount of money, but obviously it's capped how much they can spend. It's created the most competitive professional sports league in the world, I believe. More proof of that today. Or maybe just proof of weirdness more than competitiveness. What about the Arizona Cardinals? They lost 9 straight games. They lost 58-0 to Seattle last week, yet they win 38-10 today. They beat the Detroit Lions 38-10. I don't know if that's more impressive on the part of the Arizona Cardinals, and certainly impressive that Ken Wisenhunt still has them playing hard. Or I don't know if that's more of a black mark on the Detroit Lions. I mean, Detroit, among the most disappointing teams in the league this year. They won 10 games last year. High hopes for them this season, and it had already fallen apart. They were 4-9 coming into today's game, but a new low getting blown out by the Arizona Cardinals. Also an example of the weirdness of the NFL. What about the Carolina Panthers? 3 weeks ago, Carolina loses to the Kansas City Chiefs, the worst team in the league. Since then, the last 2 games, they beat Atlanta, who's tied for the best record in the league, and beat the Giants 34-0 today. And then today, Carolina, on the road, blows out the San Diego Chargers. I know San Diego's no good, but still, Carolina has not looked like the same team. I mean, how do you explain it? They lose to the worst team in the league, they turn around and beat the best team in the league record-wise, and then have a great road win. So just like last season, Carolina's starting to heat up at the end of the year, but just like last season, it's not going to be enough. They're 5-9. We'll see if it's enough to keep Ron Rivera's job, for him to hold on to his job. Remember, there's transition in Carolina. General manager Marty Herney has already been fired there this season. I still think Rivera is going to probably be shown the door, but no doubt about it, the Panthers have been playing well later into the season. Well, those are all the games that caught my eye today. Certainly there were some other results. We have 1 game left in this Week 15. The New York Jets going on the road to take on the Tennessee Titans later tonight, I guess. I still have to go to sleep, so it feels like tomorrow for me. Tennessee, a 1-point favorite in that game on BETDAQ. We'll be putting a full video preview of that game up on the site here in a matter of hours. Also, Simon Millam's preview. Don't forget to check out that. Well, I guess that about does it for me tonight. I'm going to go to bed. Until tomorrow, for BETDAQ NFL, I'm John Arnette.